You've probably heard it, maybe even said it yourself. My child's a visual learner. He just needs to move around to remember anything. Or she just learns better if she says things out loud or hears things out loud. And if that's what you believe, I get it. We have been fed this line of learning styles forever. It's just ingrained in our culture. You're trying to meet your child where they're at. That's a good instinct. But what if labeling learning style is actually getting in the way of your tween's learning? What if it's actually narrowing the kind of thinker they're becoming? Let's unpack this myth of learning styles. As you are preparing for this upcoming school year, you have probably been thinking and talking about, well, I need to know my kid's learning style so I can figure out what curriculum, and then the year is going to go much better. I'm going to show you what to focus on instead. So by the end of our session, you'll understand why learning styles don't hold up in the real research, what actually works to help your middle schooler grow into that flexible, independent learner that you are trying to move them towards. Because middle school, it's not the same as elementary, those younger years, but we're also not at high school yet. We need to figure out, how do our kids learn, but it's not actually about learning styles. Now, if you want a list of flexible learning strategies, I'm going to be talking about them today. I have got a printable reflection sheet for your tween and a list of some learning strategies. So just drop the word toolkit in the chat and I will send that over to you. Now, if you're joining me live, welcome. Type live in the comments. Would love to say hello. And if you are watching this after the fact, type in replay so that I know that you joined. Have you ever taken one of those quizzes to find out your child's learning style? There are a lot of them. Seems like everybody has a what's your child's learning style? In fact, I have been guilty of working towards developing that. And then I started doing some more research and I'm like, wait a minute. This isn't actually about learning styles. I need to take a step back. I need to let people know, don't panic about learning styles. So let's talk about why this idea that we each have, one best way to learn, it feels helpful, but it often backfires when it comes to middle schoolers. So why is this backfiring? So learning styles, they became popular in the 70s and 80s, and the idea just stuck. People liked this idea. It sounded helpful. Let's teach kids in a way they prefer, and they will learn better. But the science, that's not what the science said. That's what we wanted it to say. But after reviewing dozens of studies, I found no reliable evidence that matching the instruction to a person's learning style improves learning. Another study showed students were taught in their preferred learning style and in styles that they didn't prefer. And there was no improvement when they were taught in the style that they preferred. In fact, some students did better with a style they did not choose. Even the American Psychological Association put out a public reminder saying there's no scientific evidence to support the idea that matching teaching to learning style improves outcomes. So You can take a breath, get this weight off your shoulder when you're thinking, oh my goodness, if I don't match the curriculum to my child's learning style, I have failed them. You have not. You have not failed them. There is another way. When we give our child this learning style label, we're meaning to empower them, by saying, hey, you're an auditory learner. I'm guilty of this. I have a kid who does learn a lot of things by listening. So I think, oh, okay, well, they're an auditory learner. Therefore, I should try to get as many auditory learning resources as possible so they can learn the best. Doesn't actually work that way. And in fact, when you give your kid that label, what it does is it plants the seed for this fixed mindset. So then all of a sudden they think, well, if I can't hear it, I can't learn it. Or if I can't, I'm not good at reading, I have to listen. Or I need hands-on stuff, or I just won't get it. So that label puts them in the box and sort of closes their mind to other ways of learning. Middle schoolers need encouragement to try all sorts of ways of learning things, not labels to tell them what they are and what they aren't. And it's not your fault that you're looking at your child and saying, what is their learning style? That is the pervading cultural idea that we have to teach using learning styles. Now, here's what works better, especially for middle schoolers. Let's figure out, okay, so we're not doing learning styles. Well, then what? We're going to shift from preference, like maybe they prefer to listen to audiobooks versus reading, so that's the preference, to purpose. Moving from preference to purpose. And this is what research-backed teaching actually recommends. So we're using multi-modalities. So instead of matching a lesson to a preferred style, we expose kids to the concept in several ways. You have visuals, you have discussion, you write about it, you have physical engagement. This is called dual coding theory. It shows that learning sticks better when we pair visual and verbal formats together, not when we isolate one. Now, your child may prefer to watch videos, but that doesn't mean they don't need to practice reading, taking notes, summaries. Preference isn't the same as strength, and strength can grow with the right kind of practice. What we want to do is build a learning toolkit. So instead of putting them in that learning style box, we want to open up a bunch of different modalities. We want to build a learning toolkit, a toolkit that helps them learn in a variety of ways, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So there's this universal design for learning. It just means we're offering different choices for how they take in information and how they show what they know. So maybe for something, they need to just sketch something out, and that shows, yes, there's evidence of learning. Maybe they record a voice memo. Maybe they do a project. Maybe they write an essay. So there's all sorts of ways that they can demonstrate knowledge. We want to experiment with other forms of learning. What about flashcards? Flashcards work with some things. Color-coded notes. Get out the highlighter, color code the notes. That is connecting a whole bunch of different ways of learning. Talking it out. Maybe you have somebody who verbally processes, but don't stick them in a box and expect them to verbally process everything. Maybe flashcards would be good for some things. Notes, good for another. And then perhaps when they're studying history, they need to talk it out to get that timeline sorted out in their head. Then they make color coded notes. Maybe they have flashlights so they can remember the dates. Maybe they want to teach it to their teddy bear or to the dog. When you're teaching something to somebody, it reinforces those ideas in your mind. Maybe they want to turn their notes into a quiz. So there's all these different ways of learning. It's not just, oh, my kid is an auditory learner. We can use checklists, mini deadlines. So, okay, let's try to get this done in the next 10 minutes, or let's get this done today, and then let's get that done this week. Visual timers. I'm big on visual timers. I'll show you my visual timer. Very kind of flashy. This is fabulous. So you can just increase the time, you put it on, and as the time goes by, this red gets less and less so you can see the time going away. And then, of course, it beeps at the end, which is useful. Okay, so visual timers. Middle schoolers, they are not born organized. They're practicing these executive function skills. So you're going to give them the tools for that, for this time management. You're going to give them a bunch of different study ideas and options, a bunch of different ways to learn things. And it's all going to come together so they have this toolkit. So when they're coming up to learning a new thing, they go, well, what is the most efficient way to learn this? Because they don't want to spend more time than necessary. And initially, you might have to help them get an idea of what might be a good way to learn that. And then you want to encourage them to try some things on their own. Another thing is space flexibility. And this is something that is fabulous with homeschooling. So some days you might be sitting at a desk. Other days, they might be cozied up on the couch. Maybe they're sitting on the floor. Maybe they're outside. Maybe they're at the kitchen table. So there is flexibility in the study space. And we want to let the task kind of guide the setting. Sometimes when we put ourselves, say we have, we need to be reading a book. Well, sitting at the table in a hardback chair reading a book feels a lot different than cozied up on the couch with a snuggly blanket and the cat at your feet and you're reading a book. It's just going to be different. So space flexibility is important. We can talk about reflection. So you might ask them, hey, well, what helped you remember that? Or what felt hard about this? Maybe we can figure out something else. Or if you could redo this study session, like you're trying to learn this math concept and it was like really hard, what could you do differently next time? So this teaches them to think about how they're doing things and how they learn. And that is far more than say like what their learning style is. I'm curious, what is one strategy that your child already uses that works? Maybe you took a learning style quiz, it put your kid in this box, and then you're like, but when they're doing this other stuff, that isn't that learning style. So let's break out of that box and go, how does my kid learn best? What is already working that we can do more of? What are some new ideas that we can bring in and try? What are some things that we just need to kick out because they don't really work? So we still need to learn how to write, but how can we do it, take a different approach? Learn the same thing, different approach. So, if this helped you think different about writing styles and you want some tools that actually help you work with this messy, beautiful reality of middle school, just drop the word toolkit in the chat and I will get a printable list of flexible learning strategies. You know, all those strategies I talked about in here, a reflection sheet to help your child kind of notice what's working, what they can do more of, and of course, an invite to my weekly Tween Talk email. You'll get encouragement and support throughout the week there. Just go to tweentalk.co/newsletter. Now, you do not need to figure out your child's style. You need to help them get curious, stay flexible, and keep trying. You have got this. Let me know in the chat how it goes. I can't wait to hear your story.